The Spiritual Path of Judo by David Russo. Before strength becomes technique, and before technique becomes mastery, there is a quieter place few people ever reach. A place where falling is not failure, but instruction, where yielding is not weakness, but wisdom, where an opponent becomes a teacher, and where the body discovers truths that the mind has spent a lifetime resisting. Judo is practiced through grips, throws, pins, discipline, and repetition. But its deepest lessons cannot be measured by victories or belts. They appear in the moment pride is released, fear is faced, and force is transformed into awareness. This is more than the story of a martial art. It is the story of learning to fall without being defeated, to act without unnecessary force, and to become stronger without becoming hardened. This is the spiritual path of Judo. Introduction. More than a martial art, Judo is often seen as a sport of throws, grips, and controlled combat. Beneath that physical expression, however, is an educational philosophy intended to develop the entire human being, body, mind, character, and relationship with others. Jigoro Kano founded Kodokan Judo in Japan in 1882. He did not simply collect fighting techniques and give them a new name. He carefully refined what he had learned from older schools of jiu-jitsu, retaining methods that could support effective training while building a discipline with a larger educational and social purpose. Judo means the gentle way, but its gentleness should never be confused with passivity. The gentle way is intelligent action. It is the ability to adapt without surrendering one's integrity, redirect force without becoming consumed by it, and respond to pressure without wasting energy. Gentleness in Judo is not the absence of strength. It is strength guided by awareness. Kano's philosophy rested on two great principles: Seiryoku Zenyo, commonly understood as the maximum efficient use of physical and mental energy, and Jida Kayo, mutual welfare and benefit. The first teaches us to use ourselves wisely. The second reminds us that genuine progress cannot be separated from the well-being of others. Together, they transform Judo from a fighting system into a way of living. To walk this path is to learn how to fall without panic, rise without resentment, compete without hatred, and improve without humiliating another person. The opponent is not merely someone to defeat. The opponent is the person whose resistance reveals what still needs to be refined within you. This audiobook is therefore not only about competition, it is about consciousness, character, and the lifelong practice of returning to balance. Chapter 1. The Principle of Maximum Efficiency. One of Judo's central principles is Seiryoku Zenyo, the maximum efficient use of physical and mental energy. This is sometimes simplified as doing more with less, but its meaning reaches much deeper. It asks the practitioner to use every available resource intelligently: strength, timing, attention, posture, judgment, and intention, without wasting energy or unnecessary struggle. On the mat, this principle appears as clean technique. A trained judoka does not attempt to overpower every opponent through raw strength. They look for the correct angle, the appropriate moment, and the opening where a carefully directed movement can accomplish what force alone cannot. The throw becomes effective because the entire person is organized around one clear action. Every unnecessary movement creates another opportunity for imbalance. Excess tension slows reaction. Anger narrows perception. Desperation causes the body to rush ahead of good judgment. The practitioner gradually learns that physical waste and mental waste are connected. A scattered mind produces scattered movement. Maximum efficiency does not mean that effort is never required. Judo can be physically exhausting and mentally demanding. The principle means that effort should serve a purpose. Hard work becomes valuable when it is guided by awareness, while uncontrolled exertion can become another form of confusion. This lesson begins to reshape life beyond the dojo. People frequently spend enormous amounts of energy replaying conversations, resisting circumstances they cannot change, defending pride, or trying to control other people's reactions. The energy is real, but it does not always move life forward. The gentle way asks a different question. What does this moment actually require? Some situations demand decisive action. Others require patience, communication, preparation, or silence. Wisdom is not found in reacting equally to everything. It is found in knowing where energy can be used meaningfully. Over time, efficiency becomes an expression of inner clarity. The judoka discovers that less unnecessary struggle creates more room for effective action. Life begins to feel less like an endless battle and more like a changing series of moments that can be entered with intelligence. Maximum efficiency is therefore not a shortcut around discipline. It is discipline refined until nothing unnecessary remains. Hello, this is David Russo. As a child, I practiced judo, and although I did not fully understand its deeper meaning at the time, some part of the experience stayed with me. Now, as an adult, I find myself returning to judo from a different perspective, not simply to explore its techniques, but to understand its spiritual path. What can falling teach us about rising? What can yielding reveal about strength? And how can the gentle way change the way we meet the pressures of life? Chapter 2, Yielding as Strength. Yielding is one of the most misunderstood ideas in judo. To people who associate strength with constant opposition, yielding can look like surrender, but in a gentle way. Yielding does not mean collapsing, retreating from responsibility, or permitting harm. It means refusing to waste strength by fighting force in the least effective direction. When an opponent pushes, the instinctive response may be to push back. When they pull, the instinct may be to pull away. But direct resistance can create a contest decided primarily by size and strength. Judo offers another possibility. Enter into contact, understand the direction of the force, and guide it toward imbalance. The judoka does not pretend that the force is absent. They accept its reality completely. That acceptance allows them to work with what is actually happening rather than with what they wish were happening. Force that is understood can be redirected. Force that is denied may arrive before a response can be prepared. True yielding requires sensitivity. The practitioner must feel changes in pressure, posture, intention, and direction. What appears soft from the outside may require extraordinary awareness within. Yielding is active intelligence concealed inside apparent surrender. This principle can transform human conflict. Emotional force met with emotional force often escalates. Anger produces anger. Defensiveness produces more defensiveness. And the desire to win a conversation can destroy the relationship in which the conversation is occurring. Yielding does not require abandoning truth. It may mean listening before answering, stepping away before reacting, or changing the angle from which a problem is approached. A firm boundary can still express the gentle way when it is clear, proportionate, and free from unnecessary cruelty. Flexibility becomes a form of freedom. A rigid identity must defend itself constantly because every challenge feels like a threat. A flexible person can adjust without believing that adjustment erases who they are. The spiritual lesson of yielding is not that every force should be welcome. It is that resistance should be chosen intelligently. Sometimes the strongest response is not to stand exactly where the pressure expects to find you. Chapter 3: The Art of Falling and Rising Again. Every student of judo must learn how to fall. Before spectacular throws, advanced combinations, or competitive victories, there is ukemi, the disciplined practice of receiving the ground safely. The body learns to release its breath, protect vulnerable areas, distribute impact, and move with the fall rather than resisting it in panic. This may appear to be merely a practical safety skill, but it contains one of judo's greatest spiritual lessons. Most people instinctively stiffen when they sense themselves losing control. They fight the fall even when the fall has already become unavoidable. Judo teaches another possibility. Once the moment cannot be prevented, intelligence shifts from stopping it to meeting it well. The ground is therefore not an enemy. It is a teacher that never changes its nature. It offers immediate and honest feedback. Pride cannot persuade it. Strength cannot intimidate it. And excuses cannot soften it. The practitioner must learn to cooperate with reality as it is. With repetition, fear begins to change. Falling may still demand attention, but it no longer produces the same panic. The nervous system develops familiarity with instability. What once felt like catastrophe becomes a transition that can be navigated. Ukemi also makes training possible. Without the ability to fall safely, partners could not practice throws with trust and control. The person receiving the technique is not merely being defeated. They are participating in the development of both practitioners. Life contains its own forms of ukemi. Careers change, relationships end, plans fail, identities are disrupted, and circumstances can shift before the mind has time to prepare. Not every fall can be avoided, but the way we meet that fall can influence how deeply it injures us and how clearly we are able to rise. Spiritual ukemi does not mean pretending that loss is painless. It means refusing to let impact erase identity. It means absorbing an experience without allowing it to define the remainder of your life. The event matters, but it does not become the whole story. Falling correctly is not failure. It is skill under conditions of lost control. Rising is not the denial of what happened. It is the decision to continue without allowing the ground to become your permanent home. The practitioner eventually understands that resilience is not the ability to remain standing forever. It is the ability to return, changed by the impact, instructed by it, but not destroyed by it. Chapter 4: Balance Within and Without. External balance in judo is never taken for granted. A small shift in posture, a misplaced foot, or a moment of poor timing can transform stability into vulnerability. Balance is not a possession that can be acquired once and kept forever. It is a living condition that must be continuously maintained. The practitioner learns to feel imbalance before it becomes obvious. Weight distribution, gripping pressure, breathing, and direction all become signals. The body begins to read what the conscious mind has not yet put into words. Good posture does not mean becoming rigid. A person who refuses to move may feel stable, but that stability can disappear as soon as an unexpected force arrives. Functional balance must remain adaptable. It allows movement without losing structure and adjustment without collapse. Internally, the same principle applies. Emotional imbalance often begins subtly. A tightening of judgment, a flash of fear, a surge of pride, or an impatient desire to force the result. Left unnoticed, these small changes can reshape perception and decision making. A person may believe they are reacting to an external problem when they are actually reacting from an internal imbalance. The situation may be difficult, but fear exaggerates it. The disagreement may be manageable, but pride transforms it into a threat to identity. Judo teaches the practitioner to notice these shifts without immediately condemning themselves for experiencing them. Awareness comes before correction. You cannot restore a balance you refuse to admit has been disturbed. Balance is therefore not the absence of disturbance. It is the ability to respond to disturbance and return. The body moves away from center and finds it again. The mind becomes distracted and returns to the present. Emotion rises, communicates what it carries, and is prevented from taking complete control. The spiritual path is not a permanent state of perfect calm. It is a relationship with departure and return. Balance becomes less about never being moved and more about knowing how to find one's center again. Chapter 5, The Ego in Combat. The ego enters judo quietly. It appears in the need to win quickly, dominate visibly, resist being corrected, or prove strength at every opportunity. It can disguise itself as confidence while tightening the body and narrowing awareness. A practitioner controlled by ego may force a technique that is not available because abandoning it would feel like admitting failure. They may use excessive strength against a smaller partner or treat every practice exchange as a championship contest. The desire to look powerful interferes with the ability to become skillful. The mat exposes this condition honestly. Tension becomes predictable. Overcommitment creates openings. Anger delays perception. The opponent does not always need to be stronger. They need only to recognize where pride has disturbed balance. Winning can also feed illusion. A successful throw does not necessarily mean the action was technically refined, just as losing does not prove that the entire effort was worthless. Victory and defeat contain information, but ego turns them into identities. As training deepens, the practitioner may begin to observe ego rather than obey it. The goal is not to destroy every sense of self or eliminate healthy ambition. It is to recognize when the desire for recognition is making intelligent action impossible. Humility in judo does not mean thinking poorly of oneself. It means seeing oneself accurately. Strength is acknowledged without exaggeration. Weakness is recognized without shame. The practitioner becomes willing to learn from people of different ranks, sizes, ages, and abilities. This relationship with ego extends into daily life. Many conflicts continue long after the real issue could have been resolved because neither person wants to be the first to soften. Apologies are withheld, mistakes are defended, and relationships are sacrificed to protect an image of being right. Judo asks what becomes possible when the need to prove oneself is released. Movement becomes simpler. Correction becomes useful. Defeat becomes instruction. Success can be appreciated without becoming a throne. The ego may continue to appear, especially under pressure, but it no longer needs to lead. In the space created by observing it, clarity can return. Chapter 6, Kuzushi, the wisdom of imbalance. Every effective judo throw begins with kuzushi, the disturbance or breaking of balance. Strength alone is rarely enough to move someone who is stable, prepared, and correctly positioned. But once balance is disrupted, even a small and precisely timed action can produce a powerful result. Kuzushi is not always created through direct force. It can emerge through movement, timing, pressure, release, or the opponent's own reaction. A push may invite a push in return. A pull may provoke resistance in the opposite direction. The aware judoka senses that reaction and uses it rather than fighting against it. This reveals why sensitivity is often more valuable than aggression. The practitioner must feel where weight is moving, where posture is weakening, and where intention is becoming committed. By the time imbalance is obvious to an observer, the decisive moment may already have passed. Traditional descriptions of throwing technique often move from kuzushi into tuzukuri, the positioning or fitting of the body, and then into kaki, the execution of the throw. These stages remind us that results have conditions. The final action may be visible, but it succeeds because awareness and preparation created the opportunity. The same principle appears within the individual. Anger shifts emotional balance. Fear alters posture and attention. Pride causes overcommitment. Impatience moves us before the moment is ready. Long before an external defeat, an internal form of kuzushi may already have taken place. Self-awareness allows us to recognize these subtle changes earlier. We begin to feel when judgment is tightening, when frustration is controlling our choices, or when the need to prove ourselves is pulling us away from good judgment. Kuzushi also teaches that instability is not always negative. A fixed position may feel secure, yet it can prevent transformation. Sometimes an old identity must be disturbed before a new possibility can emerge. Sometimes certainty must lose its balance before deeper understanding becomes possible. Life repeatedly moves people away from familiar ground. Although that movement can be frightening, it may also reveal that what appeared permanent was only a temporary arrangement. Imbalance creates danger, but it can also create an opening. The spiritual lesson is not to remain perfectly balanced at every moment. That would be impossible. It is to recognize the imbalance, understand its direction, and choose what happens next. Chapter 7, Respect as the Foundation. Respect in judo is not an optional decoration placed around physical practice. It is the foundation that makes serious training possible. The bow at the beginning and end of practice marks a transition into and out of a shared space of discipline, responsibility, and learning. A bow does not make one person inferior to another. It acknowledges that both participants are entering an exchange that requires trust. Each person temporarily places their safety and development in the hands of someone else. The training partner is not an obstacle standing between the practitioner and progress. They are one of the conditions that makes progress possible. Every throw depends on their participation. Every counter reveals something. Every fall expresses trust that the technique will be practiced with control. Respect includes the responsibility to protect the partner. A technique is not successful simply because it overpowers someone. It must be applied with awareness of context, experience, size, ability, and safety. Control is part of skill. Respect also extends to teachers, students, the dojo, and the tradition itself. This does not mean that authority should never be questioned or that harmful behavior should be tolerated. Genuine respect includes honesty, accountability, and the courage to protect the dignity of the people within the practice. The dojo becomes a container for transformation. Ordinary competition for attention and status can be set aside long enough for a different kind of relationship to emerge. People of different backgrounds meet through a shared discipline where progress depends on cooperation as much as individual effort. Respect eventually becomes more than etiquette. It changes how strength is understood. Power is no longer proven by the ability to disregard another person. It is demonstrated through the ability to remain controlled while possessing the capacity to act. Without respect, combat becomes domination. With respect, even resistance becomes educational. The opponent can challenge you intensely without becoming your enemy. The spiritual foundation of judo is therefore relational. Character is revealed not only by what a person can do, but by how they treat those who make their development possible. Chapter 8. Discipline, Repetition, and Randori. Repetition in judo may appear monotonous from the outside, but internally it is a process of continuous refinement. Each repetition removes something unnecessary, a hesitation, an extra step, misplaced tension, or a delay between perception and action. What looks identical is never truly the same. The body is slightly different. Awareness has shifted, and another detail becomes available. The beginner repeats a technique to remember its steps. The experienced practitioner repeats it to investigate principles hidden within those steps. Through practice, movement begins to enter the body more deeply than conscious memory. This is not mindless automation. It is knowledge becoming embodied. The practitioner no longer needs to explain every motion internally because the body has learned its structure. Discipline is voluntary return. The judoka comes back to the same fundamentals not because nothing has been learned, but because understanding continues to deepen. Repetition becomes a kind of meditation in motion. Yet, repetition under predictable conditions is not enough. A technique may appear perfect when a partner follows an expected pattern and fail when timing, resistance, or direction changes. Judo therefore includes randori or free practice. In randori, partners move, attack, defend, resist, and adapt. The exchange is not completely scripted, but it should remain guided by learning and responsibility. Each person provides the other with a living problem that cannot be solved through memorization alone. Randori is not simply an attempt to win every exchange. At its best, it is a demanding conversation. One practitioner asks a question through movement, and the other answers. An opening appears, disappears, and returns in another form. This reveals the difference between memorization and understanding. Memorization expects reality to follow the lesson. Understanding can apply the lesson when reality changes. Life resembles randori more than rehearsed technique. Circumstances move, people respond unexpectedly, and plans encounter resistance. Preparation matters, but adaptability decides whether preparation survives contact with reality. Discipline, therefore, means more than repeating what is known. It means returning willingly to uncertainty. The practitioner trains the familiar until it becomes dependable, then enters the unpredictable to discover whether that knowledge has become wisdom. Chapter 9. Presence in Motion. Presence in judo is not stillness. It is complete engagement with what is happening now. The moment awareness becomes trapped in memory or anticipation, timing begins to break. A practitioner who continues thinking about the previous exchange may miss the opening directly in front of them. Someone preoccupied with an imagined future attack may respond to something that has not happened and expose themselves to what is actually occurring. The grip exists as it is being felt. Balance shifts as it is being perceived. The opportunity exists only for the moment in which its conditions come together. Judo makes the cost of distraction immediate. Presence is not created by forcing the mind to become empty. It develops through repeated return. Attention wanders, consequences appear, and awareness is brought back to the body, the partner, the breath, and the unfolding exchange. As skill develops, the distance between perception and response begins to narrow. The practitioner does not need to describe the opening before acting on it. Awareness and movement become one continuous process. This state is sometimes associated with the idea of mushin, often translated as no mind. It does not mean unconsciousness or the absence of intelligence. It points toward action that is no longer obstructed by excessive internal commentary. Thought is valuable during learning, preparation, and reflection. But in the decisive moment, too much thought can become interference. The mind attempts to control what the body has already been trained to understand. Presence also transforms daily life. Many people occupy one moment physically while living in another mentally. They replay what can no longer be changed or rehearse futures that may never arrive. The present becomes a hallway used only to travel between memory and worry. Judo repeatedly returns the practitioner to what is real now. This breath, this pressure, this movement, this decision. Presence does not guarantee victory or remove uncertainty. It ensures that when life presents an opening, you are actually there to recognize it. Chapter 10. The Gentle Way in Daily Life. The principles of Judo do not remain confined to the dojo. They gradually enter posture, communication, decision-making, work, relationships, and responses to difficulty. The mat becomes a concentrated version of life, while life becomes a larger place in which the same principles can be practiced. The gentle way is not the avoidance of conflict. Some situations require confrontation, boundaries, courage, and direct action. Judo does not teach people to become passive in the presence of injustice or danger. It teaches them to act without adding unnecessary force. A difficult conversation may require honesty without humiliation. A personal boundary may require firmness without hatred. A failure may require accountability without self-destruction. The action remains strong, but excess is removed. Timing matters in life just as it does in technique. The correct word spoken at the wrong moment may fail. A necessary decision delayed too long may lose its opportunity. Action taken too early can be as ineffective as action taken too late. Judo also teaches that not every pressure must be answered in the direction from which it arrives. Criticism does not always require immediate defense. Provocation does not deserve automatic retaliation. Sometimes the wisest response changes the entire angle of the exchange. The practitioner begins to recognize wasted energy more quickly. Resentment that has no constructive purpose, arguments that exist only to protect pride, and attempts to control what cannot be controlled become easier to identify. This does not make life painless. Awareness may actually make certain patterns more visible and therefore harder to ignore. But clarity creates the possibility of choice where reaction once seemed automatic. Eventually, strength and softness stop appearing as opposites. A person can be compassionate and decisive, flexible and principled, peaceful and capable of protecting what matters. The gentle way is not a personality type. It is the continuing practice of meeting reality with the least unnecessary conflict and the greatest available awareness. Chapter 11. Preparation and Alignment. Judo does not begin at the moment of impact. It begins long before contact is made, in the quiet preparation built through repetition. The body is trained so thoroughly that it does not need to search desperately for answers under pressure. It has already encountered the pattern many times. Preparation, however, does not mean living in tension. Constant anticipation can make the body rigid and exhaust the mind before anything happens. True readiness is relaxed attention, awake without being anxious, prepared without being consumed by imagined danger. Readiness must also be joined by alignment. When posture, breath, movement, timing, and intention travel in different directions, even a familiar technique breaks apart. When they align, complexity becomes simple. Alignment is coherence. It is the moment when the entire person agrees with the action being taken. The hands do not rush ahead of the hips. The body does not perform what the mind secretly resists. Intention and movement become one coordinated expression. There is a recognizable difference between forced motion and aligned motion. Forced movement seems to argue with itself. One part of the body compensates for another. Strength attempts to repair poor position, and hesitation interrupts commitment. Aligned movement feels direct because nothing essential is traveling against it. This principle reaches far beyond the dojo. A person may work hard while remaining internally divided. They may prepare endlessly for a goal they do not truly value or pursue a direction that conflicts with their deeper convictions. Effort without alignment creates exhaustion because different parts of the self are fighting one another. Preparation without direction can become avoidance. People sometimes remain in permanent preparation because beginning would expose them to uncertainty. They gather information, wait for confidence, and rehearse possibilities while the actual opportunity passes. Judo reminds us that preparation must eventually become action. The practitioner enters, commits, and accepts that no amount of rehearsal can remove every unknown. When preparation and alignment come together, action becomes cleaner. There is less hesitation, less internal friction, and less wasted energy. Difficulty does not disappear, but the individual meets it as a unified person. Alignment is never permanently achieved. Like balance, it requires adjustment. The practice continues. Prepare, align, act, observe, and return. Fall when falling cannot be avoided. Rise when the moment arrives. Refine without believing refinement is ever finished. Chapter 12. Mutual Welfare and Benefit. Maximum efficiency can sound like a philosophy centered entirely on individual performance, but Jigoro Kano joined it with another essential principle, jira koe, commonly translated as mutual welfare and benefit. This principle completes the spiritual architecture of judo. No one learns judo alone. A practitioner needs teachers, training partners, opponents, and a community willing to participate in the difficult process of improvement. Every successful throw requires someone who trusts the thrower enough to receive it. Every safely practiced Technique depends on restraint, cooperation, and responsibility. Your training partner is therefore not a disposable instrument for your progress. Their development matters alongside your own. If you improve by repeatedly injuring, humiliating, or exploiting others, you have misunderstood the discipline you claim to be practicing. This does not remove competition. It gives competition a worthy purpose. Two people can test themselves intensely while still respecting one another. Each provides the resistance the other needs. Each reveals weaknesses the other might never discover alone. Even in defeat, both people can leave the contest with greater understanding. The winner discovers what worked under pressure. The loser discovers what must be refined. Neither person develops without the presence of the other. Mutual benefit also prevents maximum efficiency from becoming cold or selfish. An action is not truly wise merely because it produces an advantage for one person. Its larger effects must be considered. Efficiency without humanity can become exploitation. Strength without responsibility can become domination. Applied to daily life, Jigoro Kano asks whether our advancement contributes to or diminishes the people around us. It asks whether success must come at another person's unnecessary expense. It challenges the belief that life is meaningful only when someone else is losing. Mutual benefit does not mean that every interaction produces equal outcomes or that competition disappears. It means recognizing that sustainable progress depends upon relationships, trust, cooperation, and shared conditions. The highest expression of judo may therefore occur away from the mat. It appears when strength protects rather than intimidates, when knowledge is shared rather than guarded, and when personal refinement becomes a contribution to the community. The path begins with learning how to use your energy well. It matures when that energy serves something greater than yourself. We rise through individual discipline, but we flourish through mutual benefit. Bonus chapter: The Many Expressions of the Gentle Way. Judo is one discipline, but its principles are explored through several forms of practice. Each form reveals a different dimension of the same art: technical precision, adaptability, self-protection, physical development, competition, or philosophical understanding. At its foundation is Kodokan Judo, established by Jigoro Kano. The Kodokan tradition preserves judo as a complete educational discipline rather than merely a collection of competition techniques. Its purpose includes physical training, technical study, mental development, ethical conduct, and the application of judo's principles to life. Technical drilling allows movements to be studied carefully and repeated with increasing precision. Here, practitioners develop posture, movement, gripping, entries, throws, pins, holds, transitions, and methods of safe practice. Repetition establishes the vocabulary through which more spontaneous judo can emerge. Randori introduces freedom and unpredictability. Partners resist, move, attack, defend, and adapt while remaining responsible for one another. This is where techniques are tested against living movement rather than performed in isolation. Kata offers another kind of understanding. Through structured forms, practitioners study principles, technical relationships, traditions, and situations that may not appear regularly in modern competition. Kata is not simply a ceremonial performance. When practiced seriously, it preserves the reasoning contained within the technique. Shai, or contest, places skill under concentrated pressure. Timing becomes urgent. Consequences become immediate. and emotional control is tested alongside physical ability. Competition can reveal character as clearly as technique, how a person behaves when winning, losing, being challenged, or facing an unfavorable decision. Judo also contains methods related to practical defense, including material preserved through particular kata. Self-defense is therefore better understood as one application within Judo's wider technical and educational tradition rather than as a completely separate official branch. Modern competition emphasizes some techniques more than others because rules are designed to create a recognizable sport and protect participants. Those rules have changed over time, but the larger philosophy of judo cannot be reduced to scoring. Recreational, educational, adaptive, veteran, and competitive judo may emphasize different goals. Bodies, ages, abilities, and ambitions differ, yet the principles of intelligent energy, responsibility, balance, and mutual benefit continue to connect them. Someone may enter judo seeking fitness, confidence, self-defense, competition, community, or personal discipline. Over time, the reason for remaining may change. What begins as an interest in learning how to throw can become an education in how to live. The expressions are many, but the path is one. And the deepest root of that path is not the ability to throw another person. It is the understanding gained through learning when, why, and how power should be used. Conclusion: the practice that never ends. Judo does not conclude when training ends. It continues in the way the body remembers balance, the way awareness returns after distraction, and the way falling no longer feels like the end of movement. What begins on the mat gradually becomes a quieter form of perception carried into everyday life. Techniques can be learned, refined, and eventually performed without deliberate thought. The deeper training, however, is never complete. Efficiency must be rediscovered in unfamiliar situations. Yielding must be relearned when pressure changes form. Pride must be recognized whenever it disguises itself as certainty. Life continues to create imbalance. Plans change. People resist us. The ground appears where we did not expect it. Judo cannot promise that we will remain untouched by these experiences. It can teach us how to meet them with greater awareness. Over time, the separation between practice and living begins to soften. You recognize when tension is unnecessary. You sense when resistance is strengthening the force against you. You become more willing to adjust without interpreting every adjustment as defeat. You recover from mistakes not by pretending they did not happen, but by using them as instruction. The fall becomes part of the movement. The disruption becomes part of the return. You also discover that your path cannot be separated from other people. The partner who throws you helps you learn to fall. The opponent who defeats you reveals the opening you could not see. The teacher gives form to knowledge, and the student gives that knowledge a future. Balance is not a final achievement. Awareness is not a permanent state. Even mastery must remain teachable. The sincere practitioner returns to the beginning repeatedly, not because progress has been lost, but because every return reveals something that could not be understood before. A white belt and a black belt may practice the same fundamental movement, but they do not experience it in the same way. Years of training change what can be perceived. The movement remains familiar while its meaning continues to deepen. This may be one of judo's greatest spiritual lessons. There is no final moment when the path has nothing left to teach. Every achievement opens another level of responsibility. Every answer makes a more refined question possible. The spiritual path of judo is not about becoming someone whom nothing can knock down. It is about becoming someone who can meet the ground without losing themselves. Someone who can yield without disappearing, act without wasting force, compete without hatred, become strong without becoming hardened, help another person improve without diminishing their own progress, and rise without needing to pretend the fall never happened. In the end, judo does not make life predictable. It makes us more prepared to meet its unpredictability. It does not remove impact. It transforms impact into instruction. It does not demand that we become immovable. It teaches us how to move without losing our center. It does not offer a final destination, only a gentle way that continues for as long as we are willing to practice it.